tips on getting your research findings published. Professor Dr. Phongming Moi BSc, Huns, MSc, Nutrition, MMedSc Public Health, PhD Professor Department of Social and Preventive Medicine Faculty of Medicine University of Malaya, Malaysia.
All right, so okay, thank you. I'm very happy and honored to be here to share on tips on getting research findings published. I, as a lecturer in the Department of Social Preventive Medicine, Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya, I do write paper. I supervise my postgraduate students in their thesis as well as their manuscript, and then I also review papers as well as serving as associate editor in some journals. So I would like to share some of my experience in getting research findings published. Right. Okay, the content of my talk will include why we write a manuscript, what are the trends in research and publication, and how to choose an appropriate journal, and the scholarly writing style and related tactics in abstract, 𝐓𝐈𝐈, and others, which are also equally important, like how to submit a manuscript, what are the editor's criteria, how to handle reviewer comments, and how to handle rejection and publication ethics, right? Okay, so why do you write a manuscript? I think if you are a researcher, you want to share your success, you want to report your research findings, you want to educate your peers, or if you are postgraduate candidate, this is a requirement for your master's or PhD. Okay? Right. So before we proceed, I would like to briefly go through what are the new trends in research and publication. Previously, most of the journals are in hard copies and space are really limited. But now we are more for open science, but the not so good news is that open science means open access journal, and the authors would need to pay a fee, a paid charge, to get the publication or the manuscript published, and readers will get it free. So in open science, the authors are to pay for the paid charge when the readers can get to read the manuscript for free. So if the researcher or the authors don't have enough funding for publishing in open access journal, there would be a little bit difficult, but we still can look for journals that they don't charge, but the competition would be tougher, of course. Okay, so the next new trend is that open data, meaning that some of the journals are requesting for your data sets when your paper get published. So the data should be attached as a supplementary material and so on. So this is what is happening. More and more journals are requesting for data sets to accompany with the published manuscripts. This is in order to for any other researchers who are interested to analyze the data more. Actually, they could check whether, if they realize that something is wrong, they could check, or they could have more information about the study, right? And also sustainable publishing practices, meaning that in terms of preventing climate change, we don't print, not so many print journals are being produced, but more on online journals. New methods of assessing research. Currently, there is this pre-print platform where researchers, they can submit their manuscript into this pre-print platform, but it is not peer-reviewed. So this is to allow timely sharing of findings. This is very common at the beginning of the COVID times, when a lot of studies were conducted on COVID because it was a new disease, and a lot of information was shared on this preprint platform. However, the studies were not peer-reviewed, and then the findings were not scrutinized or peer-reviewed. So the interpretation or acceptance of the findings should be more cautious. Okay, and besides that, there is this identifiers, persistent identifiers, meaning that all manuscripts, whether it's in preprint format or is peer-reviewed and published in open access journal or in print journals, they are all given this a unique ID that's called DOI and is easily searchable. Okay, so these are the new trends in research and publication. Right, so when you have your findings ready and you have written up, or you are in preparation to write up your findings in the manuscript style, you should know roughly which journal you want to send your manuscript to. So what is the purpose of publishing? Who do you want to share your findings with? Where you expect to publish the journals. So for journals, we have some very specialized journal or some more general journal. Journals like PLOS ONE, BMJ Open, BMJ, or Scientific Reports. These are general journals. But if you want to send to a more specific one, probably if it's a nutrition study, you may want to send to Nutrition Journal, or and so on. So you need to know whether you want to send to journal which is more general or more specialized. Okay, so of course you want to send to more specialized journals, then you need to match your manuscript with the scope of journal. Okay, and whether you want to send to international journal or local journal. Other factors of journals are impact factor. Not only some universities, they implement some high standard. They not only want the postgraduate students to publish their findings, they also want the student publish their findings in journal with impact factors, with citation index, or it is registered in the Web of Science. So when you select journals, you have to be careful, and you need to match your scope of studies as well as the university requirement or your employer's requirement of where it should be published. And of course, time to publish, or whether the process of submission and publication is fast or not. Usually open access journals are faster than the print journals. And so free or not is a very important factor, as well as digital or hard copy. So make friend with Jane. So you can also use a search engine that is called Jane to help you in finding the journal which matches your scope and so on. So Jane stands for Journal Author Name Estimator. So you can just Google for Jane or Journal Author Name Estimator, and then you can put in the keyword, and they would recommend, this search engine will recommend the journal that match your topic, match your manuscript topic. Okay. Another point is beware of predatory journals, because there are some journals is just out to make money, and they don't have proper peer review process. So we need to be, researchers or authors need to be aware of that. Right. So after deciding the journal that you want to send your manuscript to, you have to, we are going into the scholarly writing style and related tactics. Okay, so what are the features of a well-written manuscript? Of course, as a reader, you want the manuscript to be clearly written, have a good research question, easy to read, interesting, and then there are no mistakes, information are under the correct headings, visually appealing, short and sweet, and then has impact on practice. Okay, so the feature of a well-written manuscript actually are what the readers would like to have when they read a paper. So we should try to make it as simple and easy to read, and of course short and sweet. So the various types of manuscript are original research, short communication. Short communication has the features of an original research, but the number of words may be shorter, maybe 1,000 to 1,005 words, and there may be a limit of tables and figures. And systematic review, letter to editor, and some others like invited reviews by journals. So the important sections of a manuscript are titles, the body of content, which are the sections on introduction, methods, results, discussion, others like conclusion, recommendation, and so on. So it is very important to have a good title, because a title will persuade readers to read your manuscript, and it will give the content, it will describe the content of your manuscript accurately, and it will make your manuscript accessible to others in your field when you use the appropriate keywords. So when you do a search, right, when you send in some keywords, when you do a search, the first thing that appears in the screen in your Google search will be the titles. So that's why it's very important. So how to write or choose a title? It must be accurate, specific, concise, informative, attract readers, and short. It's very easy to say, but it may not be so easy to do it, right? Okay, so there are various ways to write titles. We can do it the classical way, the convention way, and we can also phrase the title in the question format, or we can give the answers of in the title. That means it is an assertive sentence title. The results or the hypothesis is answered in the title. Okay, so the conventional or the classical way of writing a title could be changes in body mass index, like HbA1c, blood pressure, and LDL cholesterol among type 2 diabetes patients in Malaysia, a population-based longitudinal study. So this tells us in the classical way, and the study design is also provided. Or sugar-sweetened beverage intake and its association with cardiometabolic risk among adolescents. So this is the classical way of writing titles. The question in the title can be, do workplace physical activity intervention improve mental health outcomes? So from this title, we know that the manuscript is writing about whether workplace physical activity intervention will improve mental health outcome or not. Or does change in perception following counseling result in improved quitting outcomes among Malaysian smokers? So these are the questions in the title. The third method of writing title is giving the answer in the title. So the example is the modified NCEP ATP3 criteria may be better than the IDF criteria in diagnosing metabolic syndrome among Malays in Kuala Lumpur. So this paper actually was comparing which criteria, whether the NCEP ATP3 criteria or the IDF criteria is better in diagnosing metabolic syndrome. So the title gives us the answer, saying that the NCEP ATP3 criteria is better, right? The next example is the importance of social cultural context when choosing to eat healthier. So this is the findings is that social-cultural is very important when for the adults in choosing healthy diet. So this is the answer of the research. Or the last one is poor attainment of HbA1c, blood pressure, and LDL cholesterol goal among younger adults with type 2 diabetes. So this paper was trying to compare whether younger adults with type 2 diabetes have better attainment or poorer attainment in HbA1c, blood pressure, and LDL cholesterol. So the answers is that the younger adults actually they perform poorer in these diabetes indicators. So these are the various types of way to write the titles. So it's up to you and your co-authors to decide how you want to phrase the titles. Okay, there's no right or wrong. It's just that which way you prefer it to be. Right. So the steps in writing a manuscript is you have to construct an informative abstract. You have to write an effective introduction, describe your method in detail so that it can be replicated by a third person, and your results should be reported precisely. Make your discussion relevant and interesting, relevant to the findings and interesting, and make conclusion according to your findings. And all this is following the 𝐓𝐈𝐈 way. So usually the abstract would be written last, and the title you can write the title first, but after you write your full paper, you decided that if you decide to modify the title, you are also free to do so. So there's nothing fixed in stone until you submit it to the journal, right? And when you do the writing, the reporting, for us in the medical and public health field, we do have standardized reporting guidelines, which for observation study design, we have stroke. And if you are working on nutrition related studies, you can take a look at the stroke NUT. This is the extension of the stroke checklist. And then if you're writing for RCT, you should use the reporting guideline following CONSORT and PRISMA for systematic review. Quite a number of journals are already requesting the authors to do the reporting according to these guidelines following the respective study designs. So it's good to take a look at these guidelines, and you may want to use it as a guide so that you don't miss out reporting any detail. Right? So next is, what is the format of an abstract? So different journals have different requirements. Some they require structured or unstructured abstract. Structured means that you would have the headings like introduction, method, results, and conclusion, whereas unstructured is everything is in one paragraph. So you also need to know the number of words allowed. Some journals they only allow 150 words, 200 words, 300 to 400 words. I think from my experience, the maximum is about 300 words. So you should follow the format. You must have introduction, whether it's structured or non-structured. Introduction, objective, design, setting, and a short description of your participants. If there's intervention, describe it, and then main outcome measure, results, and conclusion. So these are the examples of a structured. On the left is a structured abstract where you have the heading, and then on the right is unstructured. So you have everything is in one paragraph. Okay. And now the new trend is some journals requesting for graphical abstract, but not all abstract are suitable for graphic. So it depends on the research that you do, and then on the journals that you submit to. So this is one of the example that example of a published graphical abstract. Right. So let's go into the 𝐓𝐈𝐈 section. So for introduction, It should be short and interesting. So if you are writing for an original research article, I would say the introduction should not be more than 500 words as a guide. And you should have at least 3 paragraphs. First paragraph is what we know about the topic, what we don't know, and why we need to do the study. So I'm using this paper that is on vaccine hesitancy among parents in a multi-ethnic country, Malaysia, published in Vaccine. So I just want to show you for the introduction. So first is what we know. So in what we know, we define the problem, what is vaccine hesitancy, and why is it important to study vaccine hesitancy, okay? And the epidemiology of it. So here, the authors describe the immunization coverage among infants and young children, and with the re-emergence of infectious disease like diphtheria, is important to maintain high immunization. So parental understanding on the importance of vaccinations is important. So there's an urgent need to study vaccine hesitancy. And what we know is that there is available tools in the West, but not in our country, Malaysia. Okay, so what we don't know, vaccine hesitancy has been reported in the West, but not so among the Asian countries, including Malaysia. So it is important to address the parents' concern and intervene to avoid further mushrooming of vaccine hesitant parents. Okay, and the aim of study, so to translate and assess the reliability of this vaccine hesitancy questionnaire and determine the prevalence of vaccine hesitancy and to determine the factors associated with the parents' background and vaccine hesitancy. So this is an example of what should be in the introduction section. Okay, for postgraduate students who have written a thesis, your introduction may be 10-page long. So you really need to summarize or shorten it into 1 page. You cannot give 2 or 3 pages long of introduction, because the word count, the word limit for a manuscript could be from 3,000 to 3,005 only. So you have to be able to extract the most important point from your introduction chapter and to make it into 400 to 500 words or about 1 page. All right. So next, a very important section is the method. We should remember that the method should enable the reader to replicate your study. Okay, so there should be enough information for full replication. And we can try to make this more easily understood by readers by giving a visual aid like a flowchart and so on. So the content should be, you must first define what is the study design, whether it's a cross-sectional design, whether it's a randomized control trial, or it's a qualitative research and so on. And then where is it conducted, the study area in your country, which area, which state, and who are those in the study population? What are the inclusion and exclusion criteria? It is important to mention about ethics consideration. When you deal with a human, even animals, you need to show evidence that you have obtained ethics clearance and you have got written informed consent from the respondents. You also need to detail out how you come up with a sample size through power calculation or sample size calculation, how you sample your respondents, and what are the study variables, how you conducted the data collection, whether through questionnaire, through face-to-face interview, or telephone interview, or online questionnaire. And what are the tools that you use for data collection, whether you use questionnaire, if questionnaire, is it validated, whether you use a lab measurement or any new tools used, whether it's a questionnaire or lab method, whether you pre-test or validate the instrument. And finally, how you manage the data and how you analyze the data. So all these need to be clearly written so that the reader can actually replicate the study. Okay, so this is one of the example of a study flow diagram, like how we selected the respondents. In this case, they are teachers. So teachers, and then what are the numbers that we finally include in the analysis? So like how many teachers give consent and why we excluded them, and then how many we analyze with complete data. If you are doing an RCT, more details are required so that you could get the study flow diagram from the consort checklist. Okay, so after you have described your method clearly, your results is very important, because this is where the readers want to find out what are the findings. So we can present the findings in tables or figure format, but we should not have too many figures like in graph or chart. We should not have too many charts, because there would be a limit. I think from experience, maximum 5 to 6 tables and figures. You cannot have more than that. So you can have 3 tables, 3 figures, or 4 tables, 2 figures, or so on. So usually we will present the findings in 3 tables, minimally 3 tables. First is to describe, descriptive on the risk factors or the exposure and the outcome. That usually is the table 1. Then the second table is on the association, the univariate table. And the third table would be the multivariate table. We can have more than 3 tables, but at least we should have 3 tables. And we should present the p-values as well as the 95 confidence interval where applicable. And do not overemphasize on the statistical significance. Because sometimes the p-value may be highly significant, but the difference or the effect size is very small. So you not only need to explain on the p-value, you also need to discuss on the effect size. Okay, so and another point is we need to differentiate between data and results. So if we look at the original version on the left, only data is presented, no interpretation. So it's like in 14 treated adults, the mean blood glucose was 205 plus minus 10 milligram percent. And in the 16 adult patients treated with drug X, the mean blood glucose was 105 plus minus 10 SD. So what does this mean? So we really need to, we cannot just give the results like this, present the data like this. We have to do some interpretation, like the mean blood glucose concentration was 50% lower in the treated patient than the untreated patient. So 105 versus 205, and the p-value. So this sentence gives the direction of the intervention, meaning that blood glucose was lower in the treated patients, and the magnitude or the difference is 50%, and the likelihood of chance finding is p less than 0.005. So the version on the right or in blue is a better one. Okay, so the tables and figures should have strong visual impact, informative, easy to comprehend, can stand alone, have informative legend for figures, informative titles and footnotes, use identical names for variables, unit of measurement, abbreviation in different tables. We should not use different names for variables in different tables. Okay, if you use sex in table 1, male, female, then in table 2, you should not use gender, male, female. You should standardize. So whether you want to use sex or you want to use gender in both tables. Okay, that's what we mean, what I mean by using identical names. Do not repeat in text if findings presented in tables and figures. So when you have presented your findings in tables or figures, in text, you don't need to repeat the numbers. You just highlight the points that you want the readers to take note of. Okay, so this is an example of table 1 presenting the social demographic characteristics. This is from the same paper on vaccine hesitancy. So first, we presented the social demographic characteristics of the respondents. So the table is not too crowded and then it's well spaced. Okay, so this is table 1. And table 2 will be the univariate analysis. Okay, so we try to tabulate the social demographic characteristics with vaccine hesitancy, vaccine hesitant and non-hesitant. We presented the N and percent and the p-value. So this is univariate. Okay, and we have footnote explaining the numbers. Okay, so this is a univariate association. And we have the multivariate association with the adjusted odds ratio. We presented, so we first present the crude OR and then we present the adjusted OR. So finally, this is our results. Okay, what is significant is employment status of parents as well as the number of children in vaccine hesitancy among parents. Right? So this is examples of how to present your findings in tables clearly. So the discussion, so usually the first paragraph, we would summarize what we find, okay, what it means, and then we interpret and explain your findings. You try to compare and contrast with other people's, other researchers' findings. And why are your findings important? Link your findings to prior research. Excuse me. Highlight what is new. And finally, briefly mention your strength and limitation. Okay. When you discuss your results, we should organize the section according to the way you presented the results. Excuse me. So other points to consider in discussion is that how do these results relate to the original question or objectives outlined in the introduction section? Do the data support your hypothesis? Okay, you can mention your hypothesis. There's no association in social characteristics with vaccine hesitancy. So you can, with the results, you can say, so you can reject the null hypothesis that there is an association between whatever factor with vaccine hesitancy. All right? Are your results consistent with what other investigators have reported? Okay, discuss the weakness and discrepancy. If your results were unexpected, different from the peers, so try to explain why. And whether further research is necessary, highlight the strength of the study. Okay. So from experience, the common pitfalls that I see in discussion is that the discussion is not backed up by data. Some researcher, they like to discuss do the discussion by referring to what is in the literature review, which is not really appropriate. First, you must do your discussion according to your findings or your data. Okay, you can highlight that other factors in the literature, but you did not include in your study. You can briefly highlight, but you cannot do lengthy discussion on factors that you did not study in the discussion section. And when you do the discussion, you should try to be careful not to confuse association with causality. when your study is just a cross-sectional study, you can only say that, just like just now, the social demographic characteristics is associated with vaccine hesitancy. It's associated, there's an association only. You cannot say because of this happened, the causal effect. You cannot say that, all right? Unless your study design is a cohort design or is a RCT design, then you can say, okay, having this intervention can prevent the outcome or vice versa. Okay, and we should not overemphasize on statistical significance. We should also take note of the effect size or clinical significance. If we have done an intervention study trying to improve the blood pressure control, but if the blood pressure control is only reduced by 3 millimeter mercury with a p-value of less than 0.05, we say it's highly significant, it's effective, but with a 3 millimeter mercury difference, is this clinically significant, right? So the discussion needs to be toned down because the effect size is not clinically significant or meaningful, right? So probably we can suggest further research to be done or different dosage of or intervention or drug to be used. Okay, so this is a point that I would like to emphasize. And in conclusion, the conclusions must be drawn from the study findings. Do not make conclusions from literature review. And we may provide a line or two on brief recommendation for clinical practice and future research. Okay, so that's all for the IMRAD or the main body. The references is also important. I would strongly encourage researchers to use bibliography software like EndNote or even Word. Also, they have some kind of bibliography elements. And do follow the journal format. And if the journal has template in the bibliography software, use the existing template. Do not oversight because you're using bibliography software, okay? From experience, a manuscript would have 30 to 35 references. More than that, I mean, it should not be more than that unless you are doing a systematic review. So systematic review, usually journal allow more references, but for original research, maybe is only about 30 to 35 references. Try to use latest reference within the last 5 years, if available. So others that I would like to talk a bit is authorship. So usually the postgraduate student should be the first author. The supervisor could be, if the journal allow, the supervisor could be co-first author, but not all journals allow that. Probably the supervisor can be the corresponding author if the study is fully sponsored by the supervisor. So I think it's only fair that the postgraduate student be the first author because the postgraduate student did the data collection and write up the paper, analyze the data, write up the paper, okay? And the boss, okay, the boss of the unit, the head of the unit should not be the author if there's no contribution. Now journals are getting more strict where the authors need to declare the roles of each author. So if the head of unit doesn't play any role, then the person may not be entitled authorship, but could be person to acknowledge. All right. The next section is conflict of interest. This is very important. The funder. Okay, first is the conflict of interest, whether the authors come from an institution that promote the use of some products when the paper is testing the effectiveness of this particular product. So it is important. And then whether the authors, they are being funded by certain institution that has a conflict in the research topic. Okay. Funding, meaning that whether the study is who funded the study. Okay, it's very important, especially if we are reporting on any drug trials. If the funder is the company that is supplying or producing the drug, it's very important that this is declared, and whether the funder has any role in how the findings are being presented, published, and whether the funder has any role in selection of journals and so on. Okay, so these are all very important factors. Acknowledgement is acknowledge people who have helped who have assisted in the study, the study participants and so on. And open data, as I mentioned just now, some journals they required the authors to provide the data once the study, the paper is accepted and published. So if you, for whatever reason, your team of researchers do not want to provide the data, then you have to look for other journals that don't request for open data. So after you have complete the write-up of the manuscript, you must review the manuscript before submission. You have to spot any mistakes, flaws, or gaps, standardize your term use. Do not introduce new concepts at the end of manuscript. If you want to introduce concept, it should be at the beginning, and then it needs to be consistent. Don't introduce new concept at the end. And language comprehension. So if your English is not your first language, you may want to check whether there's any incorrect word choice, any grammatical or spelling mistake, sentence construction. So you can use a grammar checker to detect and correct grammar and spelling mistakes. So you could also send for proofreading. Usually I would suggest that once you have written up the paper, you can leave it there for a few days, then you go back and read again, you'll find that there are errors, and then you can make the correction. You can also ask your co-authors to read, and so on. So when you want to submit a manuscript, prepare a cover letter. Explain why your findings or your manuscript should be given due attention for possible publication. Justify why it should be published in the journal. And then you have to ensure that you prepare your manuscript according to the journal format. Right, so once you submit your manuscript, it's the editor's role now to decide whether they want to send your manuscript for review. So what criteria the editor is looking for? So of course it's the scope, whether your research questions fall into the journal scope, whether the study is important, original, but not all journal has this in mind. Some journal, they are more open-minded. They would feel that as long as the study is done correctly with correct method and so on, they don't need groundbreaking findings. So as long as it has good method and good discussion and so on. So the study importance, originality also depends on the space of the journal. So if it's for print journal, they may be more strict on this criteria on study importance and originality. But if it's open access journal, it's online journal. If it's online journal, there is no space restriction, then it may be easier to get in. And then the reviewers concern on the quality of the writing, whether there's any flaws in the study, or whether they require a lot of editorial work. So this will also affect the decision of the editors whether to send this for review. Of course, if there are two manuscripts writing on the same topic, the editor, of course there's a competition, the editor will definitely select the one that is written better. Okay, so that's very important that when you submit, you have to make sure that that is as error-free as possible. Of course, we are human, there should be some errors, so it cannot be error-free, but try to prepare it as well as possible. So after you have submitted the manuscript, what are the possible outcomes? So after the editor going through what I mentioned just now, the editor decided that no, I'm not going to send this for review, so just reject. You'll get this very fast, within a week or two. The editor said, sorry, it doesn't fall within our scope or whatever. Okay, then the next possibility is that the editor, you pass the editor screening, is sent out for peer review. So the journal will look for reviewers. So after review, it will take quite a while, a few months. Then it can be accepted following minor revision, accepted following major revision, or the reviewer suggests to edit it as a short report. So these are the possibility, or reject after review. Okay, so when we get the reviewers' comments, the authors would have to make correction, and then finally it's accepted. Or still, I mean, sometimes after it's reviewed and then you have done correction, you still can be rejected. So don't think that the reviewers have given comment, you do correction, it sure will be accepted. There's a possibility that it still can be rejected. Okay, so when you receive the reviewers' comments, sometimes the words are a little bit harsh, and usually first, especially if this is your first time getting a reviewer's comment, my students, if the first time they get the comments, they feel a little bit discouraged, but don't be. This is a learning process. Be calm and objective. Okay, if you feel angry, don't work on it yet. Just leave it, cool down, and then come back after you cool down. Okay, so you deconstruct the reviewer's comments into the individual items that can be responded. Try to make easy changes first. Okay, then only work on the others. Respond to all the points clearly, provide point-by-point rebuttal. So you can put the comments in a table format, and then for each comment, you give your address, how you want to do whether you agree with the comment, and you do it, or you disagree with the comment, you have to give reasons, or probably you want to provide some evidence why your method is correct, and you think that you don't need to make the changes. But when you do this, you have to be courteous and do not make the reviewer angry. Okay, so be polite even if you disagree, and give your reasons for disagreement. So the timeline, so after you have submitted your paper, it's sent out for review. Usually it will take 3 to 6 months to receive a response from the reviewer. Okay, like I said just now, outright rejection from the reviewer is usually very fast. So if you have to resubmit, you do it within 1 to 3 months. And you resubmit, it will take 2 to 3 months before a final decision is made. So from the date of submission to acceptance or publication, it may take 6 to 12 months. So if you can get it done in 6 months, it's very good. So if publication is a criteria for graduation, so I would suggest that don't do the manuscript write-up at the end of your postgraduate. Don't do it at the end, but do it after you have got your results finalized. You can start writing a manuscript, submit, and then continue with writing your thesis in discussion while waiting for the feedback from reviewers. Because if you only submit a manuscript at the end, after you finish writing the thesis, then if it takes 12 months, even though you pass the viva, you cannot get the standard letter and considered graduate. So that's my advice. So if you are unlucky that after you have done correction and so on, it still get rejected, revise the manuscript, send to another journal. Then the process will start all over again. So from the statistics, 21% of manuscripts are rejected without review, while 40% are rejected after peer review. So actually the rejection rate is quite high. Okay. The last part that I would like to mention is the publication ethics, plagiarism. You should not copy from other peer researchers. You should not make up data, fraud and fabrication, and conflict of interest need to be declared. You should not duplicate, or the same findings, it should not be published in duplicates. And we should protect the confidentiality and well-being of the participants. Okay, thank you. That's all, and good luck in your manuscript submission.